Lisa, yay, and Christine.
Rob, Sandy. Hi, Chris.
Ariel.
Chris, look what I have right next to me. Shameless plug, even though it's not a heyday book. Let's see. We have Robert from third place.
Yay,
Oh,
Robert.
hey, Robert. We've got Aggie from London.
Oh, hey.
Hey, shameless
There you are.
promotion. Hey, Harvesting a Great Book from Bolinas. Wow, people are coming like in droves.
Can I eat my? Is it very rude to eat?
Go for it.
Yeah, it's actually 9, isn't it, here, Praveen?
I think it's time. Let's
Yeah, I'm just a
let's
little,
begin and then we can let people come on in
yeah.
as we
Uh,
go.
so as the crowd gathers, this is like a hands-off demonstration, but it's a hands-on one. Um, so uh, everybody, thank you and for coming. There are many of you here and many more coming. Today, as we said, Lisa and I in our invitation, we again have Praveen's, Stephanie, and Amanda from Kepler's books on who
Morning.
continue the discussion. And I'll leave it to Praveen to start because he has a full agenda and actually some slides to share too. Go ahead, Praveen.
Once a consultant, always love your slides.
Are
Well,
you in a position to share your screen, Praveen, Steve, do we have this? I
Why don't
yeah,
we,
guess.
I'm gonna share it pretty soon here.
yeah, keep it personal for a minute anyway before you go into your consultant mode.
Well, hello everyone. Let's hear a hello back. Hello.
Oh,
Hello.
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 That always wake people up. So, I did put a few slides together, and we'll go through those. But as I was thinking about this morning, I forgot to put the most important slide, together. So that will have to wait for another time. And uh, yeah, and I actually have a prop.
Can you whoever's talking? I can't. We have so many people. I can't tell. But can you mute yourself if you haven't? We were was I'm not sure who that was. But anyway, if you're on, that's great, and you want to talk, unmute yourself. But for now, mute yourself.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with a prop. Um, this is I was cleaning my office recently, and I found this thing about 12 years ago when I had just stepped into Kepler's, and I had this notion that I wanted Kepler's to be funded by the community, and for that we needed to raise money from the community to restart the business. So we launched this campaign, and and we set a goal. We wanted to raise $1 million, and people are making fun of me, saying, Praveen, that's never going to work. Nobody's going to give you money. So then somebody stopped by and basically put a quarter on my desk. I had this picnic table in the back of Kepler's where I'd set up my temporary office, and I was just working there. And somebody, actually, one of the staff members, came by and put a quarter on my desk, saying, "Here is my contribution to your $1 million campaign." So this is my prop, from that time. This is from 12 years ago, as you guys can see it. It says Kepler's 2020 project, and it has quarters and nickels and dimes, and it has dates and names of people who started, contributing to, my $1 million campaign. Um, well, we didn't raise $1 million, but we did raise, I think, about $730,000 to, reboot, Kepler's. And this was 12 years ago, and since then we've raised more. The framing of what we want to talk about for me comes down to: is it better to run a bookstore as a private business, in which case you're going to fund it with your own money and people are always going to see it as your personal business? Or is it better in today's day and age to run it as a community institution that's funded and supported by the community, not just through donations, but through volunteers, board members, and other forms of community support. And then in that case, your community institution is seen as something that's doing a public good, and you are there to just serve the public good as with the along with the, everyone else who's working in the institution. So which one is better? And of course, there are people who always want to run it as a private business and put their own money, and that's more power to them. We came to the conclusion 12 years ago that the days of running it as a private business are over. So for 12 years, going on to 13 now, we've been just working on creating these frameworks and models and ways to run it as a community institution. And that's really I think kind of what we want to talk to you about. Um, and with that, let me share a couple of slides. And here we go. Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Audio head. Okay, good. So there's a couple of slides I'm going to talk about. One is a few years ago, my friend and a fellow board member Paul Wright and I, got together and we did a lot of research and we wrote a white paper about thinking about the future of bookstores. We were calling it next generation bookstores. And one of the things we found was that the fields of literacy, arts, media have seen significant public investment over the last 150 years. I mean, we only went back as far as the late 1880s when Andrew Carnegie funded the building of libraries. And the Carnegie libraries, there were thousands of them built, all over the world, most of them, in the U.S. Um, uh, about the same time, there was the Chautauqua, movement, focused mostly on the rural, parts of America. It was in a way kind of the TED Talks and book festivals of today. And and that was a form of public investment.
Hey,
Uh,
someone needs, I'm sorry, Praveen, somebody, and I think it's, I'm trying to find, somebody else is talking and is not
Sandy.
muted.
I think we need Sandy to mute.
Thank you. Sorry, Praveen.
Explanations to my daughter or anybody else.
Ay, ay, ay.
Honestly, I have no idea.
Steve,
All
I
right.
think as the moderator, you should be able to mute people.
Yeah, I just muted her. We have so many people here, it's hard to find the talker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that
Um,
was
in the in the late 60s, the U.S. Congress basically authorized the creation of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which led to these waves of public radio stations and public television stations. And more recently, and this is still happening, and over the last 20 years or so, there has been hundreds of millions of dollars going into non-profit journalism organizations, ProPublica, Center for Investigative Reporting, the Texas Tribune. These are all being funded by foundations, by donors, by communities, because people have realized they need high quality journalism, and they can't always expect it from for-profit organizations. Um, we submit to all of you that there is already a movement underway to reimagine bookstores as community institutions that are serving a public good and that are funded by their communities and not that don't have to be run as a private business. And here's my data about why I think this movement is already underway. Uh, Okay. So just over the last 5 years, somewhere between 200 to 300 bookstores have run crowdfunding campaigns. Some of them were for pandemic relief, some are for disaster recovery, but it's becoming more and more common for bookstores to run a campaign when they're just trying to open a bookstore, open a second location, or relocate the business. So communities are stepping forward and funding, those efforts just as straight one-time donations. Um, and I was trying to get Chat GPT to scrape websites and compile the data for me. It kind of choked, but it did estimate that there's somewhere between like 2 to 400,000 people nationally who have participated in these campaigns already. That is a sizable number. And more recently, there's about 30 to 40 bookstores in the U.S. that have set up nonprofit organizations, and Kepler's was obviously one of the first ones to do that, but many other great bookstores are doing this now, and they're doing it to deepen their social impact and build more support from the communities. So I think at this point there's plenty of evidence that major donors, impact investors, philanthropic organizations like the Emerson Collective, and I know we have some people from the Emerson Collective here today, that this sort of investment is starting to happen in bookstores. And what we live, breathe, and dream about at Kepler's all the time is how to build this movement to be bigger and better, because the more normalized it becomes, the easier it becomes for every participating bookstore. And so we'll give some examples of that soon. So I'm going to turn the next slide over to Amanda.
Hi, everybody. Just welcome back. I did want to just please ask questions sort of in real time through the chat so that we can be as responsive as we can. For those of you here last time, we just kind of kept going. Anyway, Praveen, the quarters, that's pretty funny. I was there. We also had customers sacrifice their store credit because they did not have actual money to give, but thought that turning that in would be helpful, which it was. I think one of the things that Kepler's turnaround has really focused on is our story. We are funded by our community. I only call Praveen the owner of our bookstore when I'm mad at him. Otherwise, it's community owned. And while maybe not on paper, certainly the paper that the money was printed on that bought our inventory. And this matters because the way of doing business or the assumption that bookstores provide free entertainment and cheap goods isn't a way to support your team. And we have really focused on wages as part of that. So a few things that we do every day in the bookstore is talk about it. We talk about living wages. We talk about community support and how it's essential to our programming and existence. We do not preach to our customers about shopping on Amazon. Everybody shops on Amazon. Amazon is detrimental to a lot of community good, but I can't compete with them for discounts. Customers come in and pay full price for books because they know what they're supporting because we tell them. We also are talking with authors and publishers, independently published authors on good terms for the bookstore through Ingram distribution. Publishers, we talk to them about ticketing and the ways that bookstores need their support. And then we're also looking for donors, people who want to support us beyond buying books. And I will say our membership program, the majority of those members are not major shoppers. They come in maybe once a year, but they come in to support having a bookstore in their community. That's their primary goal here. Anyway, I think that's all I have.
Praveen, I wonder, everybody asks when it comes to, working as a nonprofit or forming a nonprofit adjacent organization, asks, is that possible? I thought there were IRS problems with that, or can the entire store become a nonprofit? Without getting in too much weeds, what's the answer to that?
Well, we're still working on creating a roadmap for how to make the entire store a nonprofit, and there is, many different threads and different ways some of the bookstores are starting to approach it. But at this point, it's abundantly clear that setting up a hybrid organization where in which the retail operation runs as a for-profit business, but you have a second nonprofit working closely with it. That is not a problem at all. It's been done plenty of times over. In fact, the Emerson Collective people can speak, for it, themselves. I mean, that is the model that that they are, funding and supporting, in a pretty, significant, way. The one other thing I want to talk about, on this slide is that, we knew that building community support from the beginning was going to be very key, which is why, we organized, this thing called a future search. And I think I see Sandra Janoff, she's here today. She lives in Pennsylvania. She's the founder of the Future Search Network. She actually came out and on a pro bono basis facilitated it. We brought together 80 people from our community, publishers, authors, customers, donors, staff, and spent 3 days, planning the future of Kepler's. And that was a great way to just build support from the beginning about this idea of, Kepler's, the new Kepler's being a community, institution and not just a private, business. We have one more slide that, Stephanie's going to talk about, and then we can go into Q&A.
Thanks. Yeah. So we wanted to put together just a practical list of things that we have put into action at Kepler's that have really moved the needle for us, and made it so that we can focus so much on staff wages, and really secure a good future for our store and our staff. And so I think first and foremost is minimizing the discounts for our B2B and bulk customers. We actually lose a fair amount of bulk sales because we're not willing to discount beyond a certain level. We often get asked, as I'm sure all of you are, if we will price match Amazon, and the answer to that is just, it's no. And it comes with a conversation about why and what we're trying to do with that income. And we really cultivate relationships with corporate customers that want to shop with us because they want us to continue to exist. They get excellent customer service from us. They get hand-holding and all of that, but like they think supporting us is a good thing and understand the limit to our discounts, and oftentimes are paying our living wage surcharge as well. The next one is kind of a personal like annoyance. Whenever I see people offering free shipping, shipping is expensive. Like all of you know, shipping is expensive. The labor, the box, the tape, the bubble wrap, just the shipping charge itself. That is money that is coming out of bottom line. So we make sure that we charge for shipping. We've talked about ticketing author events, charging for services. This is something that we've been doing with our corporate clients lately. They've been asking for curation services. They want to put in a library. And here's a list of topics. We want to fill 60 linear feet of bookshelf space. We charge them a curation fee and they happily pay that. We say no a lot. I guess that's maybe the key takeaway from this slide. We say no if it doesn't make sense for us to do it. We say no to selling at offsite events. We say no to price matching Amazon. We only engage in something if it makes financial sense for us. And that's a hard line for us. And I don't know, I oftentimes think bookstores have more leverage than they think they do. And a lot of times, if you don't ask for terms that work for you, you're just not going to get them. So making assumptions that, oh, I have to meet this bare minimum in order to get an extra couple $100. I mean, you're still working for that money. Ask for what works for you. And the worst that they can tell you is no.
Great. So that's the end of the slides. And I'm going to stop sharing the slides and we can go into, Q&A.
We have a little side discussion kind of going on about the co-op model. And I know Lisa's on the call with Buffalo, and they are a co-op model, I believe. And maybe you can speak to your decision to go hybrid and kind of look for that versus a co-op.
Yeah, actually, since Lisa is here, I'm going to ask her to speak first because I believe they're transitioning the model. Lisa, you want to talk about why you set up as a co-op and why you're going away from it?
Yeah, we were originally a consumer co-op because that was the model that made sense to purchase the store when the previous owner was going out of business and there was no one who had the dollars to buy it. And so the community wanted to buy it. That made perfect sense. But it only provided income then. Like, yes, you could get a few new owners every year, but it was a one-time thing. And so it didn't really provide any sustained income. It's still a great launching pad for us because we have been and will always be community owned. It's easier, I think, to make the case for a nonprofit becoming fully a nonprofit. And that's the process we are in now. We just submitted a 501c3 application.
And can you talk about what you submitted with the 501c3? On what basis did you submit the 501c3? Because there's not an IRS code for bookshops. So
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what our code was, but it had to do with culture. I can tell you that another time.
yeah.
I
Well,
just filled it in like a few days ago, but
we'd love to have you and your own story brand and just dive into because you've had a lot of thought
we've
and
tried everything.
so but very very interesting and good response. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it'd be good to maybe I posted the link to last sessions. A couple people, Praveen asked about last session, so I posted that in the chat. If you haven't seen it, it's really Praveen and Amanda and Stephanie were fantastic. Maybe there's one thing from the past that we could touch on briefly for people who weren't there, which is the incredible benefit you got from having a nonprofit that had its own, sort of small staff and appeal.
Yeah, so one of the thing that's frustrating about the being limited to the resale model is that the economic terms of reselling books are pretty much dictated by the big five publishers. You're going to get the books at the discount you're going to get. Yes, you can kill yourself trying to get as much inventory turns and so on and so forth. But you're going to buy books at a certain price, you're going to mark them up, and you're going to resell them. And a lot of our time and energy goes in basically breaking, reimagining, reinventing that equation of resale in terms of how do we bring in more money than just the resale of books allows us. And Amanda and I were and Stephanie were talking yesterday, and we are adding up the math between our membership program, the living wage surcharge, and that we talked about last time that we started adding about 3 years ago, and essentially taking our events program, our community programs, our school programs all off out of the P&L for the bookstore and putting them into a separate nonprofit. Uh, we are we managed to change our margin by about 15% of revenue of the bookstore. It's about 3% from the membership program that supports the store, another 3% from the living wage surcharge, and another 8 to 9 percentage points from outsourcing our events program. So if you think about it, we essentially reimagined the retail equation by adding another 15 points of margin. And where is the 15 points of margin going? That's basically going into staff wages. So our staff compensation and benefits now runs at close to 35% of the bookstore's revenue, which if you go to a classic American Booksellers Association class for how to run a bookstore, they will tell you keep it below 22% or 23%. Well, we set upon to increase it. We're like, no, with 23% of revenue, you just cannot pay your staff enough. In the state of California, the minimum wage not to have a fully exempt employee whose salary is $68,640, as of January of 2025. So if you want to have at least a few core, exempt employees, you're kind of like buyers, managers, event managers, and so on and so forth, you just cannot practically do it as well. We look at it within the constraints of just the classic retail reselling economics. So the way we add these 15 points of margin is a nonprofit is a big part of it, about 8 to 9 percent. So our nonprofit organization has a separate budget. It's about it pays for the salaries of our event manager and the marketing manager. We recently hired a community development and kind of like a fundraising person on a part-time basis, and essentially it cost us when we do the math of what does it cost us to produce an average author event, it's over $4,000. So that's how we are funding it. We're not funding it from book sales. We're funding it from ticket sales and from donations from the community. And I know again there's different models and different ways people are using the nonprofit structure, but that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to have a top-notch events program, but we didn't think that we could build it on top of just book sales.
Praveen,
Amanda,
he asked
you're
how
talking
often you do. He asked how often you do events too.
yeah, Amanda, you want to talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, the nonprofit is designed to support the bookstore, but it also has to be sustainable sort of in its own right. So ticketing has been essential, and a fight, to be honest, with publishers. Publishers want all bookstores to pitch for a ton of events in the grid, and then host those events frequently without tickets. And so the way that we push back is to suggest that ticket revenue is trying to pay the salaries of the event team. If we did not have those ticket money, that if you sell event books, it's suggested that you're profiting if you add a ticket onto that, which obviously we all know we're not. But somehow that the remainder cost after cost of goods with those event books should be able to fund professionals doing professional work. We also have to minimize, frankly, the number of events that we're doing each week. There's a huge crush on the store from a staffing point of view, from a shopability point of view, to host nonstop events. And so we are picky and choosy as to what we do. We curate, like we curate our shelves, hoping to, cater to our community, diversify and provide different content and amplify different voices. Because we're running a business, a nonprofit is a business, just a different tax identification.
Lisa, there's a question about how you apply all this to smaller towns and, smaller bookstores that don't have maybe quite the audience that Kepler says. You're doing that. You want to talk about it? Lisa,
Yeah.
that is.
We did 444 events last year, and all of them were most of them, the majority were like 12 people under. So it's a small event, and we abandoned the idea of being able to pay for those events out of normal operations. So being a full nonprofit and really lets us focus on events as one of the key reasons that people are making donations and contributions, or that people are supporting events. So we use it as because people recognize that as a place that people come together and they have the opportunities for connections with each other and to bring people who are non-readers into the space. So we're frankly in Cookeville, so we're not going to get, at least not at this point, Melinda Gates is not coming here this week. And frankly, if Ann Patchett came down the road, not enough people know her name that we could get an audience. So it's not a reading crowd. So it's a really different, one of the things that I'm starting to understand as I listen on StoryBrand is that we're all in different places, and where we are and who we're serving has a lot to do with our model, with framing our model, because that persona has to be built around the model. And even how we go to fundraising has to be built in a way that makes sense to the community that we're serving. So if wages make sense to the community, that's good. If gifting books into classrooms makes sense, if events make sense. So, in our environment, that's what's helping. And so we're doing lots of little events, and we're saying in order to do that, and our wages are sitting at 37% on the balance sheet, or on the P&L. So, which is way high. And we say, we could not have done that. We could not do these events and do these extraordinary things without your donations and without you helping the performer.
Excellent. Any other questions or thoughts? Chime in if you have something to say about this. Because it strikes me we're dealing with two different models besides profit nonprofit. We're dealing with big city and small town.
And even more than that. I think we start going down these trails, and bookshops are like thumbprints almost, So, Lisa, you're nodding,
Yeah, I was going to add a couple things to that original question around how to handle it from a smaller town. We're a pretty small city here. Um, and two things that occur to me right away. One is partners. The more you're partnering with other organizations, schools, libraries, not other nonprofits, the more you're bringing in those communities. You're doing an event that's relevant to them, ask them to be a partner. That means they're promoting, you get more people to come, plus you're reaching that community. So I think that's one really important piece. The other thing that is important as we're shifting to the nonprofit model is that I'm starting to really recognize the work we do as programs and not just events. Thinking of them as programs is more nonprofit language in a way, but it's also more true. Like there's a lot of workshops, there's a lot of interaction. And I think that framing this as programming you are doing to serve your community, that can be really helpful too.
Programming, I'll underscore that. That's really
Yeah.
a good take. And that is how we describe it in our 1023 too. So yeah, and then other grant applications. And we have 9 branches. So we have 9 branches of activities and 28 advisors on a 28 advisory person board. They don't make decisions, but they're fantastic ambassadors. And we have the head of the chamber, the head of the library, the head of the PBS station, the head of all of these other stakeholders who are doing similar work, the head of the school board. They're all on our advisory board, and they function as ambassadors. They volunteer in the space. They're part of it. So I'm just underscoring kind of the fabric of what you just said, and that helps with the events and such. So.
Lisa Schwartz and Lisa Uhrik, how about each of you telling us, explaining one program as opposed to an event, like one thing you've done as a program?
Well, I'll go first. I mean, birth to 5 is one of our big emphasis. 40% of parents aren't reading with their children, 30% because they cannot comfortably read a children's book, and 10% because they think it's not important. So our program would be that we're focused on birth to 5 reading, because that's the holy grail of education. And we don't have preschool here, and people don't think that's important. So, and the best chance you have of getting a non-reading adult into reading is to get them to read with their children. And they're going to try harder. So we're specifically working on dads, or working with dads and helping dads read. And so the program would look like doing children's book events, the normal, like you think of children's reading hour, but doing it a little bit differently, where we're actually emulating and being very purposeful about how to read with children and what works for dads. It's kind of like a 101 reading for dads. And we're doing some funny videos around that and auxiliary things. And so we've added some things now that we're doing in the schools and with the new preschool, and it sort of all envelops as a program. So we've got events and other things. That's one example.
Lisa, that's fantastic. Lisa Schwartz, do you have one that you wanted to explain?
Hey, it's Swayze. Two on one big and one small. Small are things like workshops. If you're offering your community the opportunity to come in and learn from established authors, that's more of a program than an event. And those are smaller and easier. Huge scale, we do a book festival. It's now a 4-day book festival in September, and 50 plus authors, and it's huge, and it's open to everyone in the community. It's all over the community. So something like that is definitely us bringing programming into the community.
That's fantastic. Praveen, Amanda, Stephanie, you got something you want to throw out as an example from your side?
I mean, I would say that we're looking at our community and how to serve them, and all of the stakeholders. So from a programming point of view, wanting to support debut authors and writers, we're putting on events that feature, a group of authors at the same time. They're able to build an audience, come in and celebrate new work, where if you were to do a one-on-one event with a debut author with no name recognition, you might get, actually nobody. And then from a writing point of view, having classes with an agent, for example, or how to with established writers, that is supporting that community, that's programming. But we're also looking at, for example, on Independent Bookstore Day, we're doing a pop-up in East Palo Alto, which is a much poorer community and Title I school community that just neighbors Menlo Park. We're bringing an author to their satellite library to celebrate Independent Bookstore Day, bringing the day and the store to a community that has a difficult time coming to us.
Fantastic.
love that.
Yeah.
I-
Anybody else got something they want to ask or suggest in terms of event/programs?
If not, Steve, I really would love to return to Praveen's first slide.
Yeah.
I'd never seen that laid out like that. So the idea, and I'm curious as to why 2005, and because you put the period of 2005. I love characteristic. I can't wait to share that because I think it's true. Is our bookstores, why 2005, and our bookstores part of a body of book related culture and other kinds of endeavors, or are they unique in that space for
Yeah,
public?
So you very aptly picked up the 2005. Thank you for picking that up. It is somewhat arbitrary, but my thinking was that as far as I know, and I stand to be corrected if somebody comes up with a better example, that the Kepler's first closure, which was well before my time in 2005, was the first publicly known incident where a bookstore shut down and then was essentially reopened by its community, by the community saying, no, 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 we still need a bookstore, and a grassroots, fundraising campaign that, led to Kepler's, rebirth. So I stepped into the Kepler's one the second time it reclosed, almost closed in, 2011, 2012. But the 2005 incident was broadly covered in the New York Times and so on. It's just like people had just never heard of something like that happening. So I just picked that as like a data point as the starting of the community funded bookstore movement. But it's possible that something happened even before that, because I personally didn't get into the bookstore business till after that. In fact, that story, and I was actually, in my last corporate job in Austin, Texas at that point when, that was getting played out in 2005. It just, had a big impact on me. I'm just like, wow. Um, there's like no other business in this country where people have that kind of relationship with the organization, where the business shuts down and people show up and run rallies and try to build support and negotiate with the landlord and throw money at the owner to say, please reopen your store. I was just fascinated. I'm a first generation immigrant into the country. I as some of you know, I grew up in India and I came here to do my master's and then just ended up staying. So I consider myself a student of America, and I was just so fascinated by it, just like, wow, people don't do that for any other business. What is it so special for independent bookstores? So that's why I picked 2005. But does anybody know of something like that happening before 2005 in any other bookstore, any other community? Eileen, you've been around a long time. Maybe you know something like that.
Might be muted.
Not anyone who was able to stay in business for any length of time, unfortunately.
I mean, when was the rise of Amazon from a actual hardcore bookseller? Was that at that
That was
same
around
time?
no, actually that was more like 95, 96.
Mid 90s. Yeah.
So 10 years in to sort of Amazon domination. I mean, that's an interesting corollary in my mind.
Well, and it's interesting. I mean, from the Franklin Fixtures side and data, we saw a huge drop in 2008, but really between 2004 and 8 and from the mid 90s, we saw a drop in bookshops opening. So a lot of people just not opening bookshops during that time or expanding their bookshops. And it wasn't until around 2012, 13 that we started seeing more expansions and more. I could get that specific data, but it's interesting. I have this repository since 1987 that sort of looks at independent bookshops, but it doesn't isolate nonprofits and what you're saying, Praveen, around, a public crowd. I don't think we had crowdsourcing in the mid 90s. I don't think we had that by name, but it may have happened quietly in lots of places that we don't know. It's an interesting thing. I know that Books of Wonder and Peter Glassman has had some angelic people that have come into his life from time to time and been helpful. And I know of one-off little stories like that, but nothing where it's like a community coming together. That really has been from 2012, 13 to present day, more of a thing.
I would say though, Praveen, that the local first movement started in the early 2000s. It was active when I had my store in Chicago. That would have been 04, 05. And that was essentially anti-Amazon. The idea that in order to keep your community and Main Street looking like you want it, you need to support and put your money into those places. And I think that the bookstore is obviously just the epitome of a local shop.
Yeah.
But also, don't you think that the new nature of bookstores like Kepler's and Timothy Don, Cleo's, which is on, is about encouraging people to come in to events, encouraging people to browse. So in a way, Amazon as an enemy has disappeared because it's in a different category. If I want a single book and I'm really only interested in price and I don't care about anything, I'll go to Amazon. That's not me, somebody, one will. And whereas the bookstores you guys have created, a lot of the people that are on, they're much more about participation and browsing and stuff like that, which Amazon can't offer. So in marketing, of course, it's really important to differentiate yourself. And I think bookstores, since the pandemic, because who could go browse during the pandemic? I think the pandemic was really tough on bookstores. I would say as a board member of not a publisher, it was actually good for publishers, but for the bookstores, it was really tough. But now there's a huge opportunity in terms of, differentiating yourself and inviting people in.
Yeah, in fact, I think the other way to look at what happened in the pandemic is another sign, because a lot of bookstores really survived on their web sales, on their website sales. And if you think about it, customers didn't have to be buying books at higher prices from the independent bookstores. They could easily have been just buying books from Amazon at deeper discounts, but they were choosing in very large numbers to support bookstores through their websites, knowing they're paying higher prices because they're trying to keep their bookstores in business. So it was an act of giving. It was probably the largest act of community stepping forward and saying we need to save our bookstores. Let's buy books from them. Let's buy gift cards from them. And that's how a lot of bookstores really survived, the pandemic, especially during the lockdown, months. I know we did. Because the store was closed. I mean, everything we talk about browsing and curation didn't matter because all you had was, our stupid websites.
I want to add to what you're saying, Praveen, because during the pandemic, people were supporting bookshops, and we also have, Lisa said, the government, the PPP, and those kinds of injections. It speaks to how little goes how far a little bit goes, because we saw at Franklin just this huge eruption of people expanding their stores and reconfiguring their stores during the pandemic, adding fixtures, changing fixtures, all of those things. So people were actually making investments. They get the little bit of PPP, it helped them over the edge, and they reinvested in their businesses, which I found fascinating, because instead of the fear factor and running from it, just that little bit of donation, that little bit of extra help them become better and bigger.
Yeah.
Great.
Any other thoughts from anyone? Questions? You can go anywhere you want. It's a bookstore.
I might pick on a few people to and invite them to speak something.
Eileen is raising her hand, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I want to jump in just because this is a group who convenes to discuss reimagining, and which is the only thing that's on my mind these days outside of professional bookseller school. And I'm going to share a document I just started on topics to discuss as an industry and why they exist, what works, what doesn't work, how we can reimagine the process, so
I
that we
might need to
can.
make you co-host here. There you go. Okay.
So it's in, oh, I sent the link. Anyone could go into it.
Oh, I thought you wanted to share it. Okay.
Yeah, it's in the chat if anyone, and I welcome everyone to go in there and drop in their feelings about anything, add more to it so that we can then broaden the reach of this discussion, because we need to bring all the players to the table, as well as all the points I just started quickly. And there's a lot of things we can talk about. Pricing is the first one, but it gets down to lay down dates and co-op and publisher direct to consumer sales. And I just want everyone who participates to come with an open mind, because everybody has a reason that they like something. And then there's always a reason why it doesn't work for some element of our industry. So if we work collectively to find a way that we can all do business that would work well for all of us. So, and I do ask, if you participate in this document, that you do put your name next to any of your suggestions, comments, feelings, so that we can keep the conversation going.
And Eileen, I gather from briefly in 1 second looking at your document that you're also really focusing on the challenges like Praveen in terms of pricing and lockdown, stuff like that.
That's a major one. We are the only ones who have no control over how much money we make in terms of how we sell our books. There isn't anyone else who has to suffer through that.
It's great. It's, in retail, you expect to pay something different in New York for dinner than you do in Cookville. And
Right.
so you get, maybe still be a hamburger, but it's going to be a different price. And other retail has that capability. So
Right.
It really, really is one of the constraints that we're under.
Right. And even going back to, since we did talk about Amazon's initial leg up is they weren't charging tax. So all the consumers, and everyone on this call is probably the same kind of person who's like, ooh, can I save on tax? I cross state lines to save on tax if I'm going to do a big clothing shopping. So they had that leg up for a decade. And then they fought really hard to keep that benefit. But in all those years, they were creating their database and their systems, and then became the go-to place. So not that we can undo any of that, but they wouldn't have been able to do what they are without some sort of leg up, and it was taxes at first.
Yeah. So I agree with Amazon's advantage early on being the sales tax, but back to pricing, I continue to struggle with why do so many people see that as a constraint that they cannot solve for at their own bookstore in their own community, because we started adding a living wage surcharge to every transaction at the bookstore, which is essentially a form of price increase. And we've been doing this successfully for 3.5 years, and we had to build support from our community, but we are essentially just changing prices now. And I would love for other people to try it, test it with their communities, and and we talked about this in the last month's session. I mean, if you can raise prices even by 1%, I mean, and literally, if you're selling a $30 hardcover, 1% on that is 30 cents. If you can add a 1% line to every transaction, that 1% goes straight to the bottom line because there's virtually no cost associated with it. I'm posting a link here about a page on our website where we disclose that there is prominent signage in our bookstore everywhere about this surcharge we're adding, because frankly, I just got tired of going to these forums with the bookstores and publishers, where bookstores would talk to publishers about, oh, you must see the value in what we do. Can you help give us more margin? Can you help let us do different pricing? And publishers' answer generally is no, no, and no. And I'm just like, oh, why can't we just do it at our own bookstore? So we did. Uh, so
You mentioned publishers, and you've got a unique perspective, having worked and several people on the call. I, we have the narrative that you mentioned that publishers are making all the money and not sharing it. Is that true? Is there, or are publishers struggling similarly, or what's behind the curtain in the publisher world?
Well, it differs from publisher to publisher, but I mean, generally the big five publishers disclose their financials, and you can just look at how much money they make, and those are the five that are essentially dictating the terms that everyone else follows. So a lot of small publishers tend to have, some tend to have great financials, some tend to have terrible financials. There are non-profit publishers, Gail Wadawa is here from Heyday Books, they're actually non-profit publishers. So the idea of profit, doesn't even, factor in, there. But listen, I mean, the big five publishers are corporations, and they make a lot of money. They're not going to give you more money, so you can, keep wasting your time trying to get them to change, or you can just say, I can. The Robinson-Patman law is very clear. It's a federal law which says resellers get to decide the price of the goods they're reselling at whatever price they're going to sell. So just because there's a price listed on the book, it's printed on the book, doesn't mean you can't change it. I mean, a lot of bookstores do discounts over the list price, so you can lower the price. You can also increase the price. And the question is, can you build support within your community for people to pay higher prices?
Yeah,
And
Praveen, I was going to ask you about that because it seems to me what you've done so wonderfully and other people on the call have done is to build community support first and then institute a way of expressing that support, if you will. And that
yep.
that if you haven't, done all the things we've all been talking about to turn, like you did, a bookstore into a community center, then it's going to be harder to get that. If I go into a restaurant and they have 2% for the wait staff, I'm like, okay, they're meet them, they're nice, but what's the cause there? Well, but in a bookstore, there's a huge opportunity to explain to your community what the cause is.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to share this real quickly here. This is a survey we did back in October of 2020 at the height of the pandemic, and that's when we were trying to figure out whether our community will support this living wage surcharge or not. And here's the question we asked people. Hey, we're considering adding a small surcharge to pay living wages. It's becoming a practice at restaurants, and then we gave them four options. And let me see, can you guys see this? Is
You
it
can see it. Looks like 1 or 2% got great favorability, no problem.
Yeah, so we give them basically four options: 1%, 2%, 5%, 10%, and then they could say no problem, I'll pay it, or they could say it'll pinch, but I understand, I'll put up with it, or they could say no, I can't support this, and I'll have to shop somewhere else. And the responses, at like 2%, we literally had 80, like 95, 96% of the people saying 2% is not a problem. 4% were saying I'll have to go somewhere else. And we did the math and we were like, that's okay. If 4% end up going somewhere else, we'll make some more money from the 96% who are paying this additional 2%. And frankly, I don't think those 4% have even gone away. I think even they are paying it because our overall sales have actually gone up. That was just a quick way of for us to test whether or not our community will support it. But this was after 8 years of working on this community institution. You are basically supporting this, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of messaging, a lot of support had already been built in. Uh, Amanda, what were you going to say?
How much do surveys how often do you do surveys? And secondly, how much do they build community? By you turning to your customers and saying, what do you think of this if we do this? Seems to me a really good community practice.
It is a good practice. I don't know if it necessarily builds community because people can't really see what each of them is saying. They can't really build on each other's responses. But they are a good tool and certainly a good practice. And we tend to do them at least a couple times a year where we would survey people for some specific topic. Now we have Sandra Janoff here. I would invite her to speak something to the topic of how do you actually build community. Sandra, may I ask you to speak a few words about that?
Yeah, for sure. But you're not going to believe I have a side topic that I'm diving into now as you're speaking. How to build community. It's my work, which is, I co-developed Future Search, which is a strategic planning meeting, period. But given that the heart of that is getting the whole system in the room. And when you get the whole system in the room and enable them to learn about all of the issues, what's happening outside the system, inside, where they've been, where they are, where they aspire to go to, that 2.5 day or 3 day meeting in and of itself builds that temporary planning community that takes a vision that they create amongst all of the perspectives, but a shared aspiration, a shared vision translated to action. So that's called community. But I want to tell you where I am at this moment and what you've given to me. I am running a future search with the native nations of the United States. This title that we're in the planning now, honoring culture and shaping futures for children and families. And the emphasis is on preschool children and creating learning, support for working families, because there is, we all know, no funding for the schooling for that age development. And then how we support these young children in learning. And there you are talking about just that. And I go to Google and I say, are there independent bookstores on Indian reservations? And there are 5 that come up. So there are these 5 bookstores that are named. And I am at the same time sending an email to the planners to say, we've got a link. First of all, my link to you, their link to this piece of this meeting that's happening in June. And I want to enable these connections. And anything that you have to say about that. It's a little bit off of the topics that you were talking about, but I hope I answered your question enough. There is community in the diversity of people. Not, it's like, how do we bring ourselves together across differences that may be unimportant, may be very important, but on a task that we all care about. And all of my work with Praveen and Amanda and Steve, all of you, and Stephanie around Reimagining Bookstores is to do just that. And now there's this little beautiful thing that's happening over here with Native Americans and the reservations across the United States. And I want to make that connection to you.
Thank you, Sandra. I would actually invite Ken White. He's here, I see, with us today. And he's actually spearheading a really interesting program with the Bing, where they're supporting, BIPOC, bookstores with starting, new bookstores. So, Ken, anything you want to add about that? Anything you want to share about your program, and specifically anything on for Native Americans?
Sorry, I wasn't prepared to speak or say anything. Big Tank, if you don't know, is an incubator run by the Book Industry Charitable Foundation, and its focus is to support new BIPOC-owned bookstores across the country. And I am the program manager for that. I helped them put it together. Models. I'm sorry. Could you reframe the question again for me so that I can?
Yeah, are there any bookstores that are coming up specifically for Native American communities through your program?
There are. There's a young lady right now who's in the current cohort who is part Apache, and she's going to be doing a bookmobile, I think, that will go out into reservation areas. The problem with reservations, with Native American reservations is distance. They tend to be quite big and sparsely populated, as far as I've ever been able to tell. So in a lot of ways, the model of a bookmobile going out to places on a regular basis or periodically makes more sense to a lot of owners compared to having a bricks and mortar store.
Ken, not to take up anyone's time, but can we connect? Because I'm looking at these, three of them seem to be online. Can I connect you to what they're doing and see if there is some support?
Yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah,
Sandra,
sure.
that we need to come to an end, so we should probably
Yeah.
going. But I did want to urge you to contact Heyday Books as well, where I'm on the chairboard. Gail is on because Heyday has a whole program, the Roundhouse program around Native tribes in California. It might be interested, so you should, and I can send me an email if you need a contact.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I think that it would be good to end by, assuming everybody's got another moment, to talking, Praveen, about what's next for reimagining bookstores and what we can do, much like Eileen posting her Google Doc, what we can do to develop any new programs or push it forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're looking for just kind of indicators or input from the community on that. I mean, if people see merit in this idea of bookstores being run as community institutions that are funded by communities, supported by communities, then there's obviously a ton of work to do on that. So maybe a show of hands. I mean, do you guys want to talk more about that, or how to do that in your community? Or work on some things together. So we're always in. So I'll raise my hand.
I raise my hand.
Okay.
We've been continuing this as an offshoot of the Reimagining Bookstores event, and the energy that's been in the past this workshop and this week. I think we have a lot of people in the room who have a lot to contribute to this, to the equation and to understanding. And if we can, even if we took the folks on this call and use that as a starting space, it really feels like it's got an energy to it and a lot of good input.
Yeah, I think Lisa, you and I should talk with Praveen and Stephanie and Amanda about how to move, and Sandra too, probably, about how to move forward. And with StoryBrand, because we can certainly make StoryBrand a useful tool for reimagining it, sort of like the snake eating its tail,
Can I just say one thing? Just I'll put in a plug here for authors. I mean, I'm a big independent bookstore fan, and I'm also an author. And what Sandra talked about, getting the whole system in the room, to just be sure to always include authors in your meetings and boards and things. And all authors aren't only about selling their own books. I mean, I'm really big on read 100 books, write one. I mean, I want to read a lot of really good books, and then I'll also write my books. But I really want to support other authors. And when you talk about nonprofit, I mean, many authors, it's sort of a nonprofit deal. I mean, even if you get an advance, even if you sell a lot of books, you're paying for a lot of your own events and travel and, your overhead for all of that. So that story of it. And I think it's just important that without authors, there'd be no books, there would be no bookstores. And that's the bottom line.
You don't even have to sell. We did a future search with Kepler's and we wouldn't think of doing it without authors.
Yeah, and I think that's true for Kepler's. I don't know if that's true for all other bookstores. Sometimes I think bookstores see authors and they think like, oh gosh, they're just going to make me, carry their right. Maybe it's more true for independent. I'm with a small publisher, and I've been with a big publisher. But anyway, that's my.
And you're not thinking whole systems.
Me?
No. If anyone leaves out authors, they're not thinking whole systems.
I agree with you, and I'm just wondering if probably people on this call are thinking whole systems in that way, but I'm not sure that's necessarily true for all bookstores. But
good
anyway.
message. Good message.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about a cappuccino and a beer. Lisa, how do you want to, and Praveen, how do you guys want to wrap up? What do you want to say, each of you?
Just thank you to both of you, Steve and Lisa, for continuing to hold these sessions, bring people together, and continue these fascinating, just talking about these fascinating topics. So thank you for all the volunteer work you guys have been doing for going on 3 years now. So
It's all because of you, Praveen. You started it.
You started it, but it's Steve's energy that continues it. I'm here and I'm partnering, but Steve is the tireless advocate that keeps us going. And so I think there's some really nice things coalescing. Praveen, Amanda, Stephanie, thank you for the preparation this week, and everybody on the call. I'm just honored to have an hour of your day and especially your insights, and really think that that we can keep building. Eileen, we're going to add to that document. I love that you put that out there, and let's make that a thing. So,
and then when Lisa and I send out when I send out the follow-up with the link to this recording, there's a link to the previous one that Praveen and everybody talked on. We'll include some of the thoughts about what to move forward and how to move forward with Reimagine as well.